Good day everyone. Today we will gonna be discuss about the mode of reproduction of plants, flowering and non-flowering. Plants reproduction, it is the reproduction of the new offsprings and plants. So we will be focusing on plants reproduction, kung paano ba nagpaparami ang mga plants, how they reproduce and recreate their own kind. So we have two ways, the asexual and the sexual reproduction. Number one, what is sexual reproduction? It is produces offspring when pollen grains from the anther are transferred from the stigma of a flower. This process is called pollination. Angiosperms or flowering plants rely on pollination for reproduction. So, under the sexual reproduction, applicable ang process na pollination for flowering plants alone. So, ang mga flowering plants, nagre-reproduce sila through the process of pollination because there is the inclusion of the anther, the pollen grains, and even the stigma, the parts of a flower. Pollination is usually brought by wind, animal, and water. These are the agents of pollination. So, in the process of pollination, there is a function of the agents of pollination such as the wind, animal, and water. So on, we will see or we will witness kung ano ba ang function or use nila sa pollination. So we have two kinds of pollination. Number one, the self-pollination. It is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same plants. Ang self-pollination ay ang pagkakaroon ng transfer ng pollen grains. Kita nyo sa anther, yung number 1 na part, yan ang pollen grains. Ang anther, yung number 3, and then yung number 2, dyan papasok yung pollen grains. Kasi nga, from the anther to the stigma of the same plants. Ang pangyayari lang sa self-pollination within the plants itself. Next, we have here the parts of a flower. We have here the stigma, the pollen tube, and so on. So, ang pollen grains, papasok siya sa stigma ng flower, the opening. Pagpasok niya, it goes to the pollen tube until magta-travel siya sa style, and then ang style at ang tube, it will releases the pollen grains to the ovary. Pagkatapos the ovary, it will fertilize the pollen grains. Tapos magiging seed na siya. Tapos, ang mangyayari, pag na-fertilize na yung egg or yung pollen grain sa ovary, malalanta ang flower ng isang plant. Pagkatapos, ang matitira, yung ovary mismo, yung fertilized egg sa loob, and then, magiging receptacle siya. Magsiserve siya as a receptacle sa seed. And then, yung seed na yon, it eventually will make a new plant na. So, magiging another fruit, another plant, something like that. So, we have also here the second kind of pollination, the cross-pollination. It is a transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. So, pagkakaiba lang ng self-pollination to cross-pollination is that ang self-pollination nangyayari lang siya sa iisang plants mismo. For example, sa gomamela. Sa sarili niya lang mismo nangyayari yung reproduction. Unlike sa cross-pollination, there is a transfer of the pollen grains from the plants to the other plants. For example, dalawang gomamela siya. Yung isang gomamela at yung pangalawang gomamela. At dito na magi-intervene yung function ng isang agent of pollination or what we call the pollinator. For example, ito, unang gomamela natin, dadapo si bees or si butterfly. Magsisip sila. And dadapo naman sila, lilipat sila sa pangalawang gomamela without knowing na dala-dala nila yung pollen grains, and then papasok naman ito sa kabilang stigma ng pangalawang flower. So, yun na, papasok sa stigma, papunta sa style, sa tube, papasok sa ovary, tapos magiging seed, ma-fertilize, and then magiging fruit. Magre-reproduce na siya, gagawa na siya ng new plant. So that is the process of pollination and the two kinds of pollination. We have also here the seed dispersal. Ano ba to? Process by which seeds are dispersed to distance process by agents. So, some plants reproduce using the seed, by the seed sa buto ng isang tanim. So, paano ba siya nadidisperse? Paano siya kumakalat? Paano siya napupunta sa iba't ibang lugar? Because of the agents again. Sila ang dahilan, the agents. So, we have here the wind, the animals, the water, bursting, and by humans. So, these are the agents of reproduction. We have also the gymnosperms. So, ang tawag sa gymnosperms ay ang mga non-flowering plants. Kanina, ang mga flowering plants, tawag sa kanila ay angiosperm, while the non-flowering is gymnosperm. So, these are non-flowering plants that can also be reproduced using cones and seeds. They rely on dispersion to continue their life cycle. So, ang mga non-flowering plants, they did not depend to pollination, but then they depend to to dispersion of their cones and seed. No, yun yung process nila to reproduce para mapatuloy yung kanilang life cycle. Alright, so naka-under ang gymnosperm sa asexual reproduction. Dito sila nabilong. A process of reproduction of only one parent is required. It does not involve a seed to produce a new plant. It is also known as vegetative reproduction. So, another term for asexual reproduction is vegetative reproduction. So, the new plant grows from roots, stem, and leaves of a parent plant. So, we have here the shrubs, for example, ng asexual reproduction. Shrubs grow through stem cutting, where a stem from a parent plant is cut and then replanted to grow into a new plant. So, sa mga plantita dyan, so we have here the example, the rose, bougainvillea, is sugarcane. Kukuha ka lang ng stem nila, tapos itatanim, after 3 days, after a week, magkakaroon ka na or meron ka ng new plant. Another offspring ng parent na bougainvillea, rose, or sugarcane. We have also modified roots and stem. Meron tayo dito bulb. The rounded stem with fleshy leaves. Example, the onion and tulip. So, pag sabi natin bulb, no, rounded shape siya. Next, we have also here the rhizome. It horizontally growing plants in irregular shape. So, example, ginger, diba? Kita nyo ang ginger, irregular shape siya. So, some modified roots and stem, ito yung mga tanim na makikita or nag-grow underground. Number 3, the corm. It is short vertical stem. So, the gladiolus, taro, and kapi. So, some of these are the example of corm. Next, we have tuber. It is a fleshy underground stem or root. Yan. Example niyan, potato and sweet potato. Some of modified roots and stem, they are not just growing underground. Instead, they also run or crawl along the ground. So we have, this is called stolon or runner. Example, the strawberry or watermelon. Pwede din siya. We have also some modified roots and stem that are grow plants or reproduce plants arise from leaves. So, nare-reproduce sila through leaves. For example, the kataka-taka in some begonia leaves. So, amazing. Kasi, kukuha ka lang ng leaves ng kataka-taka, tapon mo, basta ilagay mo sa lupa. After a day, meron na siya agad na na new plant, na nakapag-recreate na agad siya. So, ganon. So, that's the mode of reproduction is all about. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, the topic that we learned for today.